ES Audio.
Welcome to the Evening Standard Theatre Podcast. I'm Nick Curtis, Chief Theatre Critic.
I'm Nancy Durrant, Culture Editor.
And I'm Nick Clark, Deputy Culture Editor.
Coming up on today's show, we'll be reviewing Vanya at the Duke of York's Theatre. This is a new adaptation of Anton Chekhov's Uncle Vanya by Simon Stevens, directed by Sam Yates, but the big news about it is that Andrew Hot Priest Scott plays each and every single character in it.
And I'll be over at the Troubadour Wembley Park Theatre with Joseph Fiennes. Yes, he who is playing Gareth Southgate, to talk about the West End transfer of Dear England.
I think if he wins some silverware next year, and if we're still running or he might come and see a show, I think he should allow himself to be celebrated.
You can see Dear England at the Prince Edward Theatre from this October.
Hello, welcome back to the Evening Standard Theatre Podcast. I'm kind of interested in this announcement that's just come out today, on the day that we're recording, about Steve Coogan coming back to the London stage. Well, I don't think I've ever seen him.
I've never seen him on the stage.
I don't think he's ever been in a straight play. He's obviously done character stuff, you know, for his comedy tours and stuff, but I don't think he's ever done a straight role on the stage.
Yeah, and he's doing Dr. Strangelove, which is sort of fascinating.
The Kubrick classic, starring Peter Sellers, obviously a comic idol of Coogan's. Now, I assume he's playing the same role.
They say he's playing multiple roles in this, so I think it's safe to assume that, yes, he will be doing those sort of 3 or 4 parts that Sellers played in the original.
That feels quite weird for a stage play, though, doesn't it? Are any of those people on stage at the same time?
Don't think... are any of them on the phone to one another? I can't remember. I'm sure there are ways of getting around it. I'm sure they'll have sort of factored that in. This is adapted by Armando Iannucci as well, we should say, who is no slacker when it comes to, fairly complicated scripts and and obviously the two of them go way back.
And it's directed by Sean Foley, who is very au fait with comedy in the West End, so it has the right ingredients.
And farce as well, so it feels like it's going to have quite that sort of slightly slapstick vibe, possibly.
It will be interesting, though, as well, because, the visuals of the film are so stark and so impressive. They've got those incredible Ken Adams sets, who built all the original Bond sets as well.
War Room. The
War Room, which supposedly Ronald Reagan was disappointed to find was not in the White House when he became president. Where's the War Room, guys? Where's the War Room? But yeah, we'll see how they do that. We'll see how they do all the big visuals. And not to put too much of a spoiler on it, but the end of Dr. Strangelove is pretty, sort of iconic, isn't it? It's going to be quite hard to recreate that.
One might say.
Yes, bombastic indeed, yes. Well, in episode 2 of Unlikely Theatre News this week, Philip K. Dick's Minority Report coming to the stage, boggling enough as it is, but adapted by David Haig, who is primarily, I think people would know as an actor. I've met him a couple of times. We've got friends in common. He's the nicest man in the world, but you'd sort of cast him as vicars or as Second World War officers. Indeed.
Right.
And he started his writing career by writing a play, casting himself as Rudyard Kipling, and the effect on Kipling's patriotism of losing his son in the First World War. It was called My Boy Jack.
Yes.
It was a really sort of solid,
really
well-made play. He wrote one about weather conditions during the Second World War as well.
I enjoyed that.
Which I didn't see, unfortunately, which was very embarrassing when I did
David
meet him.
I assumed it was another David Haig. I cannot see. This is Bernard from
Bernard.
Four Weddings and a Funeral.
It's Bernard from Four Weddings and a Funeral, yes. And from Killing Eve, people may know him from. Is adapting Philip K.
Minority Report, which was seen on screen in 2002, starring Tom Cruise.
I know, but I didn't even know it was I admit I didn't know it was a short story by Philip K. Dick. I thought it was just like the film. I had no idea that was where it came from. So when you realise it's going back to the original short story, it's a little bit less unlikely.
Yes,
but it is still quite like, oh, okay.
It's a multiple co-production. It's coming to the Lyric Hammersmith, which, as we've said previously on the podcast, has improbably become this sort of crucible of experimental drama and weird SH*T stuff you just wouldn't expect. They've actually got a bit of a track record for doing sci-fi here now, because they did Solaris back at the beginning of Rachel O'Riordan's tenure there, which I absolutely loved. Actually,
and this is promising to use cutting-edge technology, so I don't know what form that will take.
That goes basically one of two ways.
Yeah, well, it does. But
Yes, quite.
It says it wants to create a world on the borders of the science fiction and reality. So, who knows which
We'll
direction
see.
it's
Yeah,
going to be.
yeah, knock yourself out. We'll see how that goes. Oh, the only thing I was going to say was we'll be interesting to see if it brings a new audience into the theatre, because as you may or may not know, Philip K. Dick fans glory in the name of dickheads.
Oh, do they?
Yes.
That's rather nice.
So we'll see if there's a theatre full of dickheads on press night for...
It's not on you.
Yes, indeed. Not on a press night, certainly.
The other thing this week, you noticed some rather brilliant pictures that came out.
Yes, some pictures doing the rounds. Sunset Boulevard, and notice star Nicole Scherzinger covered in blood.
Yeah,
which
I think the
none of us were
curtain call,
expecting.
isn't it? So people have been snapping it with their phones
for the end of Sunset Boulevard.
For the end of Sunset
People have
Boulevard.
been snapping it with their phones. It's now got online, and she's like
Norma
basically
Desmond.
covered in blood from the mouth down.
Yeah.
I mean, I have seen the film. I haven't seen it on stage before, but I assume that fake blood is not...
Glenn Close was not
overly
covered in
used.
fake blood when she did it when I saw it last in London. So no.
You know what? I can't wait to see it.
Well,
I
exactly.
really can't wait to see it.
What's she using? An Uzi? I mean, what's going on?
Or is she a vampire? Who knows? I mean, you see sort of behind her as well this bank of sort of very bright lights, which is something that Jamie Lloyd, the director, is using quite a lot these days. You know, he used it in The Effect at the National recently. He brilliantly reinvented Evita at the Open Air Theatre. So I'm really excited to see this.
And also, Jamie Lloyd's no stranger to fake blood. I seem to remember, is it Macbeth with
Yeah.
James McAvoy, where there was blood raining from the ceiling?
Yeah.
Sunset Boulevard's quite a grim view of a kind of faded female star. I'm really interested to see how Jamie Lloyd is going to make it stand up now. I mean, he's done quite a lot to sort of increase the agency of his female character. Like, I'm thinking particularly of Roxanne, actually, and Cyrano.
Yeah.
So I'm just quite curious. You forget it's kind of meant to. It's a comedy film noir, Sunset Boulevard. So I sort of hope that will come out. I can't wait. I cannot wait.
I can't
I'm
wait.
so excited.
And just to sort of start the clock going, this will be the last eligible production opening in London for this year's Evening Standard Theatre Awards, which are coming in November.
Oh.
So the eligibility cut-off period is the night that this opens. This will be the last show that we and the other judges look at
Gosh.
before we
brilliant.
make our decisions.
Oh,
Not to make
exciting.
Nicole nervous here, if you're listening.
Yeah. She'll be fine.
Right, let's get into our first review. And in fact, our only review, but more on that later. This week it's Vanya at the Duke of York's.
Yeah. Do we say Vanya or do we say Vanya?
I think we say Vanya. Well, I say Vanya. You say
Yeah,
Vanya.
I
Two
think
against one here.
I
I'm
think
a
on
Vanya
stage
man.
here they say Vanya as well, so fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, I'll abide with the majority decision.
I haven't seen this one, Nancy and Nick. You have. This is the new adaptation by Simon Stevens, and it's quite a quirky one. So tell me about it.
Yeah, so it's Andrew Scott being everyone, basically.
It's
That's
cost,
it.
It's cost of living. You know.
Exactly.
As we said, nobody can afford a full cast anymore. So we've got Sarah Snook going to do a one-woman show. We've had Eddie Izzard doing a one-person show. Andrew Scott here. Numerous others, I'm sure, will be coming down the pipeline to us. But this one is remarkably different. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No,
Nancy.
you didn't.
Go
No, it's
ahead.
not at all. I saw it Saturday night, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, to be honest, I could watch Andrew Scott potter around a kitchen in a silk shirt for days. This is a very positive viewing experience.
You and many others do, I
in
think.
many ways. Okay, it's very, very easy to admire. But let's talk about the adaptation first of all. Like the setting.
Yeah.
It's been shifted from the garden of a Russian country estate to the kitchen, mostly, of an Irish farm.
Yeah.
I think that works really well, don't you?
Yes, I do. I think it works extremely well. I think there's a certain sort of kinship, certainly perhaps to, if we can get this deep this early on, between the Russian soul and the Irish soul. I don't know. And
Yeah, maybe.
It does seem to sit very neatly in that space.
I also think that sort of slightly isolated rural setting, Irish rural setting, works incredibly well with that kind of stultifying bubble that Chekhov's characters often make for themselves.
Absolutely.
Sort of yearning for the excitement and freedom of the city from somewhere that they could just get on a cart and go, but they never do.
Yeah.
And you see that a lot, I think, in Irish drama. And there's always someone who drinks too much.
Yes.
And there's someone who drinks too much in this one. So it's a really good idea. I think it's almost seamless.
Yeah, and it's set in a weirdly sort of non-specific time, isn't it? As
Yeah.
well, I couldn't place it in the 20th century. The major change they've made is that Alexandra Vanya, or Vanya's brother-in-law, is a filmmaker in
Yes.
this rather than a writer,
Yeah.
as he is in the original. So we're obviously somewhere into the stage of the development of film where he considers himself to be an auteur or
Yes.
a man of film.
Yes,
so we're
exactly.
somewhere in the 20th century where there's nothing politically or socially to particularly
What's he call
locate
himself
it.
at one point? A man of stories or
Yes.
something like that?
Yes,
It's
yes.
the most fantastically pompous.
Yeah. I mean, I went into this with a certain amount of trepidation adaptation, I think, having seen we don't want to go into bashing it too much, but the Izzard Great Expectations, which I think none of us liked all that much. Nope. I thought that this could look very much like a gimmick. It could look very much like a vanity project, a sort of self-conscious showing off of actually virtuosity. And I was really not just pleasantly surprised, but delighted. I absolutely thought this was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I've got one particular reservation about it, but I think there's a lot of really good stuff to say about it. I think it's very funny in places.
Yeah.
And there are a few knowing moments when, when new characters like the dog kind of appear randomly, or someone called Elizabeth, I don't even know who she is. He just sort of goes, "Oh, Elizabeth, I didn't see you there," or
yes.
"Where have you been all this time?" to the dog, and it's very funny.
I completely forgot about you.
Yeah, exactly. There's this very funny sort of there's this contract with the audience which includes these moments. It's very warm and it's kind of conspiratorial, which is, I think, perfectly suited to Andrew Scott's style of acting, and it is a bravura performance and a bravura piece of adaptation. Like, every transition between the characters is a marvel, I think, of acting and direction, just how he becomes somebody else. Just like, even when he's not yet speaking, when he plays Helena, his hand immediately goes to the little Connor in a Normal People chain that he's wearing around his neck. So there are these little physical changes, but then also changes of voice, which he does just without the tiniest of slip. And I think of direction as well. You'll know someone's coming through the door, but he'll walk round and
greet himself. It works amazingly well.
I think Sam Yates is an incredibly talented director. And this feels quite a lot like a meeting of minds, a bit like in the way that Jamie Lloyd and, say, James McAvoy was. They've worked together a few times. Cyrano particularly was the kind of epitome of that,
sort of apotheosis of that one, wasn't it?
If someone hasn't seen Uncle Vanya, will they know what's going on?
Well, which I haven't.
Well,
I've actually never seen Uncle Vanya.
Okay.
So obviously I then read about it afterwards, but I didn't. I was like, oh shit, I haven't seen it. Whoops. I kind of thought I had, and then it started, and I was like, oh no, it's the other one. One of the other
My guest said, I haven't seen much Chekhov apart from a month in the country, and I had to say to her, well, that's Turgenev.
So I was oh, okay, I haven't seen it. So no, you do. You do find yourself wondering all the way through, and possibly recognising when you have seen it where it is in the original narrative, if you know it. I guess.
I think a pre-knowledge of it would be useful. Extremely. My guest reckons she got about 50% of the story. She didn't mind because she was happy watching. She was just probably watching Andrew Scott. Really caring.
But I didn't. I mean, like I said, I don't feel like I missed any of it. But then I was listening very hard.
Yeah.
But
I agree with you about the meeting of minds, and it's interesting that Scott Stevens, who he's worked with before and has had pieces written for him by Stevens before.
He did Seawall, which is one of the first thing I ever saw him do, and basically dissolved me.
And Sam Yates and Rosanna Vise, the designer, are all credited as co-creators on this. All four of them are given equal billing as sort of, actor and co-creator, writer and co-creator. So I think it is definitely a meeting of minds. I think Simon Stevens understands Andrew Scott's rhythm and his acting as well. I think Andrew Scott is uniquely, possibly amongst leading actors today, with a huge popular following, in being prepared to throw himself headlong into quite experimental stuff. The Hamlet he did was with Robert Icke, another one of the great experimental directors around. Yeah, I think he's prepared to throw himself wholeheartedly into quite challenging prospects. And I want to ask you what your main reservation about it is, because I found not only is he very funny and very well delineates each separate character, I didn't get the usual sense of acute buttock-clenching embarrassment I get when men play women on stage, that I got to a certain extent all the way through the Lehman trilogy. I actually really loved the subtle way he played the women in this, and actors of different ages and different sort of from different economic brackets and different levels of intelligence.
No, I thought that worked really well. I don't have the slightest issue.
I thought this was quite sexy. The one sort of romantic scene.
I've got to say, actually, now you've reminded me. I have two reservations. One of which is that the sexy bits do not work for me. Like that, I absolutely was. I would say I was sort of like an inch less wide because of how much I was clutching myself. I found those moments, two moments.
That is quite a big ask, isn't it?
Embarrassing.
To tear your own shirt off and ravish yourself. It's a sort of definition of a certain kind of,
actually indulgence on turning around with the two arms.
It's a little bit.
Not
it's
quite like that, but there was every
little bit
moment
like
you were like, "Is he gonna do that?" It's just like, and so I couldn't.
I thought it did work. It did work for me. I have to say.
It's partly related to the one reservation I have about it, which is that you never, ever forget you're watching a performance.
Yeah.
You never ever are. You're not transported. And we talked about this before when we reviewed the Eddie Izzard. But this kind of thing only works if you have a virtuosic actor, right? This is a virtuosic actor, because what I hadn't articulated to myself at the time when we did discuss it last time is that it then only works at all as a showpiece. That you are sitting there admiring it immensely, but you never lose yourself in the story, because every single time he does a transition or whatever it is, you just go, oh God, that was good. I mean, Andrew Scott is a mesmerising performer.
Yeah.
He holds the audience in the palm of his hand from the second he walks on stage. And he comes on, he switches on the light, he looks at you, he switches it off, switches it on again. It's very, and everybody, you're immediately...
There's an immediate complicity in there, isn't there, that he
establishes signed that contract.
Very, very deftly and cleverly.
It's brilliant. And he is without doubt one of the most charismatic actors in Britain, I think.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me of Sheridan Smith, in a way, when we talked about Shirley Valentine.
Yeah, that rapport.
It's a creaky old thing, Shirley Valentine, and she sold it at a premium. The audience was worshipping at her altar, regardless of the fact that the show itself is not great.
Yeah.
She's got that ability to immediately make you her best friend.
Yeah.
And he has that same thing. It was a pleasure to watch her. Audiences adored her. It was a pleasure to watch him. And this is worth seeing for all of those reasons, I think. It is extremely clever. It is extremely entertaining. But it is easier to admire than to completely fall in love with.
I disagree.
And I'm completely in love with Andrew Scott.
I do disagree, because I think a lot of all the sort of pathos of the original is sort of intact there. I believed in all the emotions of it. I sort of fell in love with it as a virtuosic performance.
Okay,
because it's sort of the magic of acting. Somebody said to me, "Why bother adapting Vanya?" And I said, "Well, why bother turning Romeo and Juliet into a musical?" I think this becomes its own thing. You stop thinking of it as a sort of adaptation of. It becomes a very, very definitely its own artifact, and it's fascinating for that.
But what you don't get is that transportation. You don't sort of sit there and go, at least I didn't. I felt I didn't. I mean, I cry at everything, like loads of things, and I didn't find that this got me to that point.
Getting my copy each morning. It's copy, as in reviews, not. But yeah,
but I did love it. Like I said, I was
more moved by this than I
enjoyed
have been by some full productions of Uncle Vanya in the past.
Okay.
I mean, I do think the best ones I've seen have been amongst the finest things that I've seen. I saw Ian McKellen and Auntie Scher do Vanya and Astrov with Janet McTeer as Yelena some years back.
There was one just before lockdown as well, wasn't there, with Toby Jones?
That's right,
which got very good reviews.
And Richard Armitage, and yes, but I think this one absolutely has earns its right amongst the pantheon of Vanyas.
I mean, it is brilliant.
Yeah, it's on for a very short period of time for a West End play with a star as well.
It's
only on until
going to New York,
21st October. It probably is going to New York.
And it will do incredibly well there.
Yeah.
And I hope make an absolute shit ton of money.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
But don't keep Andrew Scott too long.
No, exactly.
We want him back here. He's ours.
Right, time for a quick break. Coming up, I'll be over at the Troubadour Wembley Park Theatre with Joseph Fiennes. Make sure to hit follow on this podcast so you never miss an episode.
Hi, I'm Marisha Wallace, and you're listening to the Evening Standard Theatre Podcast.
I'm here at Wembley Park Theatre in the shadow of the arches of Wembley Stadium, where the rehearsals for Dear England are taking place, and I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Joseph Fiennes. Welcome to the podcast.
Lovely to be here. I should just mention that I've got my two furry friends with me, my two dogs, so if anyone can hear paws walking around in the background, that's because I've got my two mascots with me.
It's great to have an audience for the recording. So, Joseph, this play opened at the National earlier this year to great acclaim, packed out houses, and now is transferring to the West End. Could you just open the world out of Dear England? What is it? What is it about?
Well, Dear England surrounds the moment when Gareth Southgate took over as manager. Well, really, he was caretaker manager, and brought in with him a psychologist, Pippa Grange, and probably revamped quietly the system there, having come from probably quite a toxic background of sports back in his day. His approach was completely different.
Well, he was the focus of a nation's ire when he missed the penalty, essentially, so he knows what it's like.
Well, that, brilliantly put, and therein lies the drama of the piece, is that Gareth, having lost with England, missing the penalty in '96, and all the baggage and trauma that came with that, takes on one of the most impossible jobs in England, which is to manage the team. And, you would ask, why would anyone put themselves through that, having gone through 96?
And it's an extraordinary transformation. I have to say, I saw it at the National. Has the man himself seen it? Have you communicated with him?
God, I would love him to see it. He's become, through this play, a real hero for me. And initially, I was invited, along with James Graham, our writer, to visit Gareth at St George's. And a few hours before catching the train, I was sadly bumped for some reason. I think it might be to do with the shyness of the man. Possibly, I'm putting it down to that. Not that he just hates me and is disappointed with the casting. But I hear he's a wonderful gentleman, and you see the way he conducts himself, as I see, for hours and hours on Sky Sports News interviews, because that's all I'm left to study. So what's been remarkable is that beyond Gareth and the sort of English game is the way that audiences have responded. Because I wouldn't say it's an uplifting drama to talk about losses. So there's something beyond the game which I find fascinating that audiences celebrate. And weirdly, it's about how we lose, which is possibly very much a part of our English psyche. And it's lovely seeing the audience come together on a sort of a deeper theme beyond winning.
Yeah, well, it's an extraordinary moment seeing, for me, at a national auditorium on their feet singing Sweet Caroline.
Well, at the age of 17, 18, for 4 years, I was a dresser at the National. So I know those corridors of old, picking up underpants and socks and washing them and having them delivered to the actor that I was dressing. And I certainly remember the audiences of that day, and they're very different to the audiences of today. And going out on that stage recently was so uplifting and wonderful, because the demographic was not a national audience that I remembered in the late 80s or 90s, but this was a fresh new demographic, all ages, possibly people that had never come to the theatre were in the theatre, and possibly those who never go to football matches are now going to football matches. So it's been a real celebration, and as you say, to see everyone at the end of the show up on their feet, singing along together in unison. It's kind of bonkers, mad, and I'm full of elation when I come off and see that.
But one of the great things about your performance is, it's brilliant how you embody the man through your acting, but actually there's a bit of physical transformation. Am I right in thinking that you needed some new teeth for the transfer here?
You let the secret out. I mean, not that anyone beyond sort of 4 rows from the front would see, but it's really for me and for those on stage with me. And possibly theatre has that wonderful thing where you kind of enter into the conceit and you buy into it with sort of these signals, and it doesn't have to be hugely spot on in terms of makeup and prosthetics like it would in film, but there's that wonderful sense where the audience, you just want them to settle to say, oh, that's Harry Kane, oh, that's Gareth, and then we get into the deeper themes. But yes, I do a little bit of makeup, and there is a pair of teeth, because my teeth are so small and Gareth's are so wonderfully big, and so I thought I would grab that. And also it changes the way I speak and the tone that I speak in, which is very helpful. But beyond the teeth and the waistcoat, what I love is that Gareth, and like all of us in life, we get these moments which I could only describe as sort of critical junctures in our life, and 96 for Gareth must have been one. And it's how you kind of turn left or right and deal with that great loss and sorrow and hardship and trauma, which I think is, for me, at the heart of the piece. So this wonderful sort of tectonic plate of emotion emerges, and it haunts him all the way through. This is James Graham's, or my interpretation of James Graham's Gareth Southgate. I'm not saying that is Gareth Southgate, sure, but for me therein lies the drama of the character beyond the outward. The outward certainly helps, but I love working from the emotionality as well within, and how that carries through and kind of reveals itself in the play that actually he's intent on winning. Even within the Reformation and the beautiful thing that's happening, he still wants that win. He still wants that silverware.
Of course. I read a fantastic quote from James Graham talking about the Shakespearean nature of his Gareth Southgate. As someone who has played Shakespeare in Love, I wondered if you saw the parallels as well.
Well, I certainly thought when I got an offer from the National that it might be a Shakespeare coming my way, or a Chekhov or an Ibsen, and I was quite excited, to get me back on the stage. And then it was Gareth Southgate, and I thought, my God. But when I read the play, actually the emotionality kind of caught me out, which I was very surprised by. But it is classic, but it's classic in the sense of an unlikely hero, and there's a little bit of the underdog which we all love and can kind of identify with. But there is the classic search for the Holy Grail that actually, that journey takes you to a place where you might recognize it's not about the silverware, it's not about the cup, it's something else that you learn. It's about the struggle. And through that struggle, you learn that role in your life is something that you can impart in helping someone else. With that in mind, it is a classic.
And there is a moment of catharsis, which again is for a particular player, and Harry Kane, but also for the whole nation, I think, as well. And is that what you're trying to sort of bring along?
I think so. I mean, I don't know. What am I trying to bring along? I guess one fulfills the objective, and then it's over to the audience to sort of align themselves with that narrative. But I think there is something that in loss and how you win deep. You don't win by putting the fear of God in people, because if you do that, they play with fear, and fear cripples you, and then you are without joy. And if you're without joy in your work, whether it's us talking together or on the stage, or whether it's footballers, you cannot create. And so fear robs you of creation, because you're not playing with joy. And I love that as something to take away, and that actually all of our struggles are really vital and important, because you might find there is someone else further down the line who needs that kind of compassion and understanding. And if you've been through that process, if you've lost the penalty on a world stage, then who better to sort of give that other person a hug and talk to about? So I think those are the bigger themes which permeate for me in a really special way.
Absolutely. And do you have a club team? Is it something you've enjoyed for a long time?
I love playing it. I'm rather like the Jack Russell that's sleeping next to me. You throw the ball, I'll run. And I love sports, and I love football. I love the national game. I do support a team, Chelsea, moving swiftly on.
No. Well, at the moment, not great, but I'm with you on that. Not great.
I think for a number of years, probably. I love the big occasions, and rather like the play, the way that people and countries can come together and see the beautiful game in a sort of epic sense. I love the scale of that, and as very much the World Cup.
And there were a couple of footballers in the night that I saw it. I don't know, have the team seen it? Have you?
I know that Lee Dixon came in to talk to us, and that was very helpful. And a fellow Arsenal player alongside him in his day, Tony Adams and Ian Wright and Gary Lineker, they've all been in, and they've loved it. They've been nothing but praise. From what I hear, I haven't met, apart from Lee Dixon, any of them.
Are you hoping that Gareth will come to the West End?
I think if he wins some silverware next year, and if we're still running, or that he might come and see a show, I think he should allow himself to be celebrated.
And my last question, really, it's been a long time since you've been in the West End. I think it was a year ago. What does it feel like being back on stage, back in the West End?
It's wonderful to be back. It's great that we can take this play to the West End. And as you said earlier, we had it at the National, and the audience represented the nation, and I very much hope that continues at the West End, and those who couldn't get to see it again now, and the tickets are at a great price. So it's affordable, it's not elitist, which is really important. It's so important to stress that this is a play for people who've never gone to the theatre, and what better play to see first time round if you've never come to the theatre. For me, I remember, I think I did A View from the Bridge in the West End. My first job out of drama school was The Woman in Black, a sort of gothic horror story. It was 8 shows a week, 2 people on stage. It was a baptism by fire. It was exhausting. So in my DNA, I'm reminded it's 8 shows a week. It's relentless. It's fun and wonderful. But it's the Olympics for the actor. I really do think that. I think that it really tests you.
Or World Cup final.
Yeah, exactly. It's my World Cup final, exactly.
Fantastic. Joseph Fiennes, thank you so much for joining us on the Evening Standard Theatre podcast.
Thank you so much.
Right, let's go to the ads. In the meantime, why not give us a follow? We'll see you back here in just a sec.
I'm Caitlin Fitzgerald, and you are listening to the Evening Standard Theatre Podcast.
Welcome back. Right, we were going to review Death of England closing time, but we can't because it was supposed to open last night, having been delayed once due to cast illness, and at about 5:30 last night, all the critics and I gather the writers were sent an email told it's not happening tonight. So we weren't able to get into it before recording the podcast.
It's such a shame. And I mean, this trilogy, or should we say quadrilogy, has really had some bad luck.
They really have. I mean, if we think back to how it started, the first was one-person show featuring Ray Spall as this sort of white son of a racist whose best friend is black and who is dating the white guy's sister. And that was cut short by the first COVID lockdown. The second part of it, which was about Delroy, the black character, was due to reopen the Olivier Theatre. You know, that was put off because Giles Terrera, who was supposed to play Delroy, was ill, so his understudy Michael Balogun had to go on, which made Michael Balogun's career. But because it was delayed, it both opened and closed the Olivier on the same night. It played for one performance before. I think it was brought back again briefly after that.
It was, because that's when I saw it. It was when it came back.
Then there was I think under lockdown they did a quick sort of supplementary script bringing both the two male characters together, but since this project started workshopping at the National Theatre Studio with Roy Williams and Clint Dyer working as co-writers and Clint as director, they've had Delroy's mother as the main character, but she's never appeared on stage yet. So that was the character Jo Martin is playing in Death of England closing time. Hayley Squires is playing Carly, Delroy's girlfriend.
Yeah, and the Ray Fiennes character's sister.
Ray Spall character's
Ray
sister.
Spall. Ray Fiennes.
Yes.
Ray Spall character, sorry.
That's fine. And but we wait to see. I mean, there was good stuff on Twitter before it opened from people seeing it in previews.
Yeah, it was really disappointing. I was really looking forward to seeing it last night.
It's such a shame. I mean, it's a sort of Pyrrhic sort of pleasure, but I think somehow in some ways this is going to ensure this production's place in sort of history of theatre, just because no show or no complete sort of work of art has had such sort of setbacks to it, I think.
No, it's true.
On quite so many sort of different levels.
They've been incendiary. You know, they're not mediocre. They're bloody good. These things. They've all been really brilliant, I think. And I am really looking forward to it. Even though it starts at 8 o'clock and it's 2 hours 40 minutes. And I'm sorry. Why 8 o'clock? Why National Theatre?
They still have to stagger, don't they, at the National between the opening. Yes, I know. But they've got 3 shows to open every single night, you know, so I think they have to.
Which auditorium's this one in?
It's back in the Dorfman, which is where they started. So
it doesn't matter, does it? Because it's round the corner. I'm sorry. I'm absolutely livid about it. But I will still go and see it because it will be brilliant. And Jo Martin, Hayley Squires, and this series, and I think it will be really. I am excited to see.
I mean, and it's like an understudy going on. When production suffers like this before it's even opened, I think the audience will be with it even more when it does open. So there is that
huge amount of goodwill.
Yeah, and there's a huge amount of significance. Under lockdown, I spoke to Roy Williams, one of the co-writers, who was sort of saying he couldn't wait, being a sort of black playwright, being given the Olivier to exclusively tell the story of a black character in the middle of lockdown. When all the theatres had been closed, that was a hugely significant act. I spoke to him and Clint about this production, and you can find that interview on standard.co.uk if you're interested. And they were talking about the significance of what this play means, really, to them and to the wider black audience, or sort of to audiences generally. When it does finally open, we will look forward to covering it.
I tell you what, though, that's something that we've now all seen. I went to see Pygmalion.
What did you think?
Night. Yeah, no.
No.
You're more on Nick's. You're on Nick's side, not my side.
I didn't like it. I thought it was. I mean, it was far too long. But also, I really, really didn't like the direction. I found it really. I realised that the freneticness of it is deliberate, but it doesn't work for me. It just makes it annoying. It's got this sort of continuous discordant piano music, which is just irritating. And I realise it's supposed to presumably sort of reflect her turmoil as she's being forced. She's trying to learn how to be a different person. I hated the set. Oh my God, I hated the set. I really, really didn't get it. I thought it was ugly. I think, as you talked about last week, there's a sort of transition from the kind of early 20th century look to a later sort of 30s kind of thing, which is done so subtly and so haphazardly that it sort of doesn't do anything. I just didn't think it worked. And, you know, as you said last week, it's got two of our finest actors in it.
This is Patsy Ferran and Bertie Carvel.
Patsy Ferran and
the
Bertie
director
Carvel.
is Richard Jones.
Yeah. And again, I don't know why they did it. I don't see what the point was. It's got a very confusing denouement. I mean, the last thing she says is great. I really like that moment. And also, I mean, her outfit at the end, loved that. Absolutely brilliant. Fantastic pair of trousers, wonderful blouse, real revenge blouse. Absolutely great. The next day, I kind of came in wearing kind of a pair of smart trousers and a nice blouse because I was like, you know, like this is
what theatre's missing, isn't it? The sort of shop the look.
Yeah, really. I loved it. It was so nice. The actress whose name actually has gone out of my head, Sylvestra Letouzle, yes, who plays Henry Higgins' mother. She's brilliant. Love her. And also has a fantastic blue dress, which is what I said to my friend when she came on in it, because by that stage I had completely lost interest in the actual play.
It is interesting, the question of what lured Patsy Ferran to it. You know, I can see the allure of the character of Higgins for Bertie Carvel, but as we said last week, it's another chance for him to do an incredible sort of physical transformation. But Patsy Ferran riding so high on the reputation of Streetcar Named Desire earlier this year, it's a weird choice. I've said when I was writing about it that I wasn't sure why it had been revived, and I don't understand really what the payoff was for her, unless it was just a step back into a piece of almost pure comedy.
But there's just all this charging backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards across the stage. I don't know, it just did not hang together for me at all. I'm disappointed. I liked watching her, I liked watching him. Colonel Pickering was exactly what he needed to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As a whole, though, I mean, we got to the end and my friend and I were both like, oh, God. You know, it was really one of those kind of, it was one of those ones where she puts her head on my shoulder, I put my head on her head. We've kind of lost, we've lost the will to live at a certain point in the second half. But the tea party is the first moment that Patsy Ferran, one of our greatest stage actresses, gets to shine. Yeah. And that's really far in. I don't know. Anyway, it's got people in it that I really like, but yeah, I didn't like it.
Okay. Well, on that note, on that cheery note.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Well, I think that's it for this week's Evening Standard Theatre podcast, probably.
Check out all our other episodes below, which include interviews with Sir Ian McKellen and Roger Allen, Jenna Coleman, Millie Alcock, Tim Minchin, and many, many more.
Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Thanks very much to our producer, Rachel, as ever. We'll see you next Sunday.
A few days after recording the podcast, news broke of the death of the extraordinary stage and screen actor Sir Michael Gambon. You can hear a special episode of the Evening Standard's Leader podcast where we celebrate his life and career. We'll leave a link in the show notes.